Autoimmune disease is one of the fastest growing health challenges of our time, and yet the dominant message hasn't changed much. Diagnose, suppress, manage. But what if that model is incomplete?
Today we're joined by Casey Hibbard, journalist and founder of Rebuilding My Health, whose work focuses on amplifying stories we don't often hear. Stories of people who've experienced remission or dramatic improvement from autoimmune disease by addressing root causes like gut dysfunction, chronic inflammation, toxic load, stress, and trauma.
The book, Overcoming Autoimmunity, brings together recovery stories across more than a dozen autoimmune conditions and reveals striking patterns that challenge the idea that autoimmunity is always progressive and irreversible.
In this episode, we unpack those patterns, explore where conventional care fails, and talk about how people can begin reclaiming agency in their healing journey.
Welcome, Casey, to the podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here today. The way we usually start each episode is by allowing the guest to explain to our listeners who they are, if they help certain people, what they specialize in, and what their passions are when it comes to their work.
I'm Casey Hibbard, and I'm the editor and founder of Rebuilding My Health, which has become a platform to share natural and integrative health success stories really across chronic or challenging conditions, things that are typically thought unfixable. I had my own health turnaround, which inspired me to go out into the world and use my journalism skills to talk to hundreds of other people who had also turned around their health in natural and integrative ways. And that led me to write a book of autoimmune success stories published last year. So really, for me, what lights me up is just capturing these stories of what's possible.
Amazing. I'm going in deep here to start with. Would you say, through interviewing all these people, would you say that there's a common denominator when it comes to like this turning point that these people have experienced?
Yeah, everybody kind of gets to a certain place, and it's different for each person where they take back control. It's what, like, when I'm talking with someone about their story and I hear that, it's always this moment of, I'm going to take back control. They may not say it in those words, but that's what I hear. They've maybe seen 20 doctors, spent most of their life sick or are debilitated or whatever. And it's like, this is enough. I'm taking back control. And they may not know what that looks like going forward. They just know they need to do that they need to kind of have more agency in terms of their health direction.
It's like advocating for themselves, isn't it?
Uh,
And having the confidence to do that. I
Yeah.
suppose that timeline is different for each person, right?
Absolutely. And it's scary, as I think both of you know, to sort of say, okay, I'm gonna branch out. I'm gonna start researching on my own. I'm gonna start looking for alternative opinions and support beyond what, doctors are telling me. Yeah. So there's a lot of uncertainty going forward, but it's empowering to take that control back and make that kind of a decision, I think, for so many people. So anyway, yeah, I certainly had that experience myself, and it's really the key that I see with all the folks that I've spoken with.
Yeah, because you
Wow.
mentioned you were a journalist, right?
Yeah, exactly. My entire career has been initially journalism, like business journalism, and then I've actually told corporate success stories for 20 years. That was my focus. I work with big tech companies to capture their success stories. And so it was really natural when I was going through my own health journey and I was coming across all of these stories that were buried in private social media groups. There'd be a group for autoimmunity or a group for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And I was in that group, and I would see these stories and think, wow, that's really amazing. These stories need to get out there and not just be, buried and have such limited visibility. So that's really what inspired me to use my skills to capture stories.
And I love that your focus is on the success stories in your online publication, your podcast, your book, because I would say, in my opinion, the prerequisite to making that decision to start advocating for yourself and figuring things out is seeing evidence that that success is possible. And that's what you're facilitating by amplifying these stories that are so commonly hidden.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, you have to believe that it's possible to move forward with these steps, because if your mindset is that, oh, I got this diagnosis, the only thing I can do is now just manage it and try to keep it from getting, worse, or try to slow down the decline, then that's a very different place of saying, I believe it's possible to get better because I've seen and heard of so many other people who've gotten better. And so really, every story that I capture, hits me emotionally. And I hope that every story that I put out there, someone is taking something away, like either, hope or an idea, like for a next step. But it really is about inspiring hope and showing what's possible.
I am so glad that that exists, because when clients first come to me, they're in all these forums that they're it's kind of like fueling their victim mentality. And they're like, so and so said this and they've never got better, and so, I'm just doomed. And I say to them, the success stories are never inside these forums. So it's a really, really nice space that you've created for people to actually seek inspiration, rather than being in these groups that are just fueling people's anxiety.
Yeah, that's really true, Katie, that you say that, because the groups can be largely negative, kind of fueling that negativity. I mean, and I think the support is helpful, to be in a community of other people who are facing something similar, but sometimes it's more of a negative than a positive if it's keeping you in the same place and not kind of giving you the tools and insights to move out of that space, for sure.
It will cultivate a very different mentality for these people and shift them into a new environment, which is going to help them,
Yeah, that's the goal ultimately. Yeah. Provide that spark of hope.
Exactly.
So if we back up a bit, Casey, you mentioned you had your own health transformation, and that is what propelled your work from the corporate space to the health space. I would love for you to share a little bit about your personal journey and how things unfolded for you.
Absolutely. So probably within a year after having a baby, having my son, I was in my early 40s. My health just started kind of unraveling, like little piece by piece. And like many people, it started with gut issues. And I mean, I'd had gut issues kind of lifelong, but it like really got worse at that point. Just kind of unstable, like having issues every day. But at the same time, I was having a host of other symptoms, brain fog, just pretty bad fatigue. I remember trying to walk up the stairs in our house, and it was just like so hard to just go up the stairs because I just didn't have energy in my body. I was like dragging myself up, and then trying to keep up with a toddler at that point and also work. Super challenging. I think probably the wake up call, or the scariest thing for me, was that my vision became blurry in one eye. And when I went to the eye doctor, she said, it's inflammation. It's, I can give you drops, but really this is looking like systemic inflammation to me. So I knew it just kind of system wide things were Everything was kind of falling apart. So I really ultimately, like, to move forward, because the digestive symptoms were the most disruptive, I kind of started there. So really my turnaround story, and I know this probably resonates with the two of you and a lot of your listeners, and gut healing was just about the first and one of the most foundational pieces of getting better. I first found out I had SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So like that was like, okay, that's something I can work on. I'm going to tackle SIBO and, heal from that. At the same time, I started the specific carbohydrate diet, which, was a diet that was created for people with IBD primarily, but for some reason it resonated with me. I'm like, I'm gonna start with that one, even though I don't have IBD. But I think the fact that it was kind of eliminating a lot of inflammatory foods for my body, that was really effective as well. So embracing an anti-inflammatory diet, starting to heal my gut. Moving forward, I learned that I also had candida and H. pylori and parasites and low beneficial bacteria in my gut. So my gut was just a big mess. So I kind of layer by layer worked on that, on the different aspects of that. And then from there, it was, I'm just layering on new things, reducing stress, getting some stress management tactics, and detox at one point, kind of later on. Like, I feel like, one thing I didn't mention is I did have autoimmune, elevated autoimmunity. So basically, my autoimmune markers were going up. Like, I would be tested maybe twice a year, and they were going up each time I was being tested. And so they were like, you have some kind of autoimmune activity going on, but I wasn't testing positive for any specific things like this or any other major autoimmune things. They thought maybe it could be mixed connective tissue disorder. But anyway, it was fine. I didn't get a specific diagnosis. But what was interesting was that I was going up on the scale, and then I started doing all these things, and then I started going down on the autoimmune scale. So each time I would be tested, my autoimmune markers were better and better, to the point where eventually I didn't have autoimmunity anymore. It took a while, a few years, but got to the point where I had no symptoms or lab markers for autoimmunity, and all the other things really resolved.
I think that's interesting that you mentioned that specifically, because this is something I hear over and over again and see is people getting stuck in the weeds of the conventional care system, where it's that watch and see approach where, okay, we're noticing like elevated markers of inflammation, autoimmunity, but we can't quite put a label on this yet, so we'll just watch and see. I see people stuck in that space all the time because I feel like our conventional model is very much diagnose and prescribe, right? And if we can't nail down a concrete diagnosis, we don't know what to do with you now. So I love that you started taking steps before waiting for that concrete diagnosis, using the information you had and being your own advocate to start moving things back in the other direction, versus so many people that I see are stuck waiting for a diagnosis.
Right, exactly. And I think probably it was a good thing that I didn't get that specific autoimmune diagnosis, because also when you do get a diagnosis, there's a tendency to latch on to, okay, with that diagnosis, I can Google these specific symptoms and outcomes. Whereas I was more like, things seem to be going in the wrong direction. Let me see if I can like reverse that and turn things to go the other direction. Yeah, and it's interesting because I had a conversation with a friend who said, yes, I fully know what's going on. I have a diagnosis, and she has an autoimmune diagnosis. And, in my mind, in reality, really, you don't know really what's going on just because you have a diagnosis. You know what I mean? Because I know you two are very root cause focused. So the diagnosis isn't necessarily what's actually going on.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time, like you just said, that diagnosis can rob us of our hope because, especially in our cases, when we finally received an IBD diagnosis, the first thing we were told is there is no cure and these are your treatment options. So it just squashes any hope of reversing your symptoms, feeling better, achieving remission. That's all gone. And then I know personally, it took me a while to get out of that feeling of hopelessness before I actually was able to stand in my power and say, no, there's more I can do here.
Exactly. And for so many of the conditions or diagnoses out there, if you do Google it, it will say in one of the first lines, there is no cure. So I think I have this rebellious spirit in that way. Like each story I put out there is hopefully the counter narrative to what is out there, to the belief there's no cure. And cure is sort of, I think it's a little bit fuzzy too. Like I don't know if I'm cured of autoimmunity. I don't seem to have it at all anymore. So I think, yeah, I don't know. It's the word cure is a little bit of a
We're so focused on cure, but
right.
we're not focused on prevention or remission or reversal as much.
Right.
And it's strange because medically we can't use the word cure. So I don't even know where this has come from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
So many people get really drilled down on the label
Yeah.
and really obsessed with the label. They forget that it should be symptom led. You should be addressing the symptoms rather than the condition or the label. People forget this and almost don't act on anything until they receive a label. Whereas there's so much time wasted where they could actually be doing many, many things to get them into a state of remission.
Yeah. So true. I mean, people can spend years searching for that specific diagnosis or label when all the while, yeah, they could concurrently instead be working toward improving their symptoms and just kind of healing at a deeper level.
And getting that kind of narrow focus, I think about some of the things that you mentioned that you discovered along your journey, like SIBO, gut dysbiosis, and parasites. And I think it's so prevalent now, especially in social media, where we want to nail down the one thing causing this. We want to oversimplify. We want to forget the nuance and say, this is the cause of this, and you need to do this, right? And that is a whole trap people can get stuck in because we're just chasing these individual things and forgetting that it's a bigger picture. Like, I'm sure there were so many contributing factors that put you in the place of, the extreme brain fog, digestive issues, and blurry vision. It wasn't just one thing. It was probably a lifetime worth of things.
Yeah. I mean, and that's where the word holistic really, comes in. It is like a well-rounded approach, I guess is how I would say it, in terms like, I wasn't just targeting SIBO. I was also taking steps to reduce inflammation. And at the same time was trying to reduce my exposure to toxins in my environment. We were getting air filters. We were trying to purify our water. It's kind of a whole life approach versus just, scattershot, or like, oh, I'm just going to do this one thing or just suppress symptoms.
And this is where that term multifaceted comes into play that me and Amanda talk about all the time, because a lot of people just home in on one thing and expect the needle to move when conditions are so way more complicated than that, and they need a multifaceted approach, just like you took, to actually move the needle enough to get the results that they want. In this case, it's symptom relief.
Yeah, it really does seem like it has to be that. And so many, I know you talk a lot about stress and nervous system and that sort of thing. So one of the interesting things that I discovered in myself and with so many of the folks I have interviewed is that they will get somewhat better with tactics like gut healing or diet, but then they kind of plateau and they'll realize that they have to get out of whatever stressful environment that they're in, whether it's work or, uh, you know, maybe they just lost a family member or there's been a divorce or, some major stressful incident. It's holding them back from truly getting better. So that's just one of the major levers that really has to be addressed for pretty much anybody. I mean, we all have stress. So critical to learn how to manage it for yourself. What are those stress tactics that you're going to embrace or self-care tactics you're going to embrace, because you can't heal even if you're doing all these other things in a stressed state.
I think one thing I've noticed, I'd be interested to hear if you've noticed this as well. Sometimes when I'm dealing with a new client, I'll notice that a person will try to double down on one thing. And so many of the clients I've worked with over the years are big on control, A-type personalities, perfectionists, people pleasers. There's this stage in the journey where they think, and I was this person too, where they think, okay, I started changing my diet and it had a positive effect. I'm going to just eat perfectly. And then I'll feel like 100% better and I can get back to my life. When often it's the thing that you're avoiding, or like you said, the environment that you're in, or the stress or the grief or the whatever, that is really that next lever that you need to pull to get out of that plateau. But we like to think if we can control our way through. And
Right. What you eat maybe is a little bit easier to control. Like that is something you can go to the store, you can pick your specific foods, cook a certain way. And I agree. So many of us focus on that. And I am guilty of that as well. Kind of really hyper focus on what I'm eating, especially at the beginning, thinking that was what was going to save me. But really there's so much else to it, kind of that's maybe an easier one than trying to get out of a stressful situation. And many of the people that I've spoken with had to make major changes. They had to leave jobs or leave relationships or get some trauma therapy to address kind of long-standing trauma, or move. So it's not easy or comfortable to do some of those bigger things that we need to do to heal, understandably.
Yeah, I 100% agree. When I finished my nutrition exams and then I started to study psychology, even when I was at the lectures, and I'd got myself into remission at this point, I was still having these massive aha moments, because from a psychological perspective, people just don't have the awareness around the fact that that is actually an even bigger part of the puzzle compared to what they're eating. Yes, of course, nutrition is a huge part of it, but the psychological piece just gets missed so often. It's not until that awareness is brought to people that they'd start to have these aha moments where they realize they're either emotionally dysregulated or that stress is causing inflammation and inflammation is causing symptoms. I feel like it's such an area that isn't spoken about enough when it comes to complex autoimmune diseases and conditions.
Absolutely. Yeah. The psychological part, I think, is huge, and emotional as well. So all of that stress component, trauma, as well as the mindset. And I know you two are big on mindset. The mindset has to be there. Your head has to be in the right space for healing. And I'm pretty fascinated with this Harvard researcher and author. I don't know if you guys have heard of her. I think it's Ellen Langer. She wrote a book about health and mindset, and she spent her entire career doing research on this. And it's kind of, we all know about the placebo effect. And it's it's way, way bigger than that in terms of where you are in terms of your mindset with health can dramatically change the outcome. And don't ever want that to sound woo-woo, but the way that you move forward in your life and the choices you make for your health are driven by your mindset. So that has to be there first.
Yeah, I find it so interesting that a person can, say, receive a terminal diagnosis, stage 4 cancer, and you read these different outcomes where a person either goes downhill immediately or takes the opposite stance and says, like, no, I don't accept this. This is not going to be my fate. And they, make a full recovery. And it's like, that is powerful. And why aren't we studying that more? Because the limiting factor there is the person's mindset and what they decided to do with it.
So don't make money off of it.
Yeah,
You're right. Just like they don't make money off broccoli.
Right. Yes. That is, steps, in the right direction in terms of health guidelines that aren't necessarily completely tied to big pharma, but it's so slow and feels like it's always going to be largely tied. The medical system is always going to be tied to money. So, yes, I feel like we're all pioneers in this revolution to change that.
I'd love to know,
Yeah.
after interviewing hundreds of people with autoimmune conditions, many of which have achieved remission or improved their situations, I'd love to hear if you've noticed any patterns between all of these people that go beyond individual diagnoses.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, pretty much it seems to be the same toolkit of things across all types of conditions, even beyond autoimmunity. I've done several Alzheimer's stories. I've done Parkinson's stories, migraines, women's health challenges, and it ultimately comes down to many of the things we've talked about. And gut health is really huge. People will talk to a woman who got rid of her arthritis when she addressed SIBO, and that was surprising to her, and like not something that is talked about, that you can heal your gut and your arthritis goes away. But as we've talked about, it's all about inflammation. So gut healing has been huge across like many, many types of conditions. And almost every story that I write has a gut healing component. Diet or nutrition are huge, and pretty much that's huge in every. It just looks different. What works for one person may not work for another because people have different physiology, different sensitivities, etc. But I will say only one person in my book of autoimmune success stories still eats gluten. And I don't like to latch onto that too much. Gluten is always kind of the bad guy, but that was an interesting observation for me. So diet, gut healing, managing stress or negative emotions or trauma, mindset is huge. And then also detoxing from toxins. So many of the stories have a toxin element, like maybe it's mold. A lot of like the Hashimoto's stories, especially people are not able to get better from Hashimoto's or thyroid issues until they get out of a moldy environment and detox from mold. I had a mold story as well. It was actually after I got better from autoimmunity, I kind of fixed that major set of problems and then realized that some new symptoms I was having were related to mold and then other environmental toxins. The Alzheimer's stories that I did and the Parkinson's as well had major detox components. One gentleman with Alzheimer's lived near an Air Force base, and he had high levels of jet fuel in his body. So kind of detoxing or living a lower tox lifestyle shows up again and again for people across the story. So those are probably the 5: gut healing, nutrition, stress management, mindset, and detox or low tox.
I find the detox conversation very interesting and sometimes frustrating from a social media perspective.
Right.
Because you have on one side the conventional medical doctors who say your body knows how to detoxify, you don't need to do anything, it does it naturally, right? And then you have the holistic wellness practitioners who are trying to sell you some detox tea or pill or protocol. And I kind of sit somewhere in the middle on the topic because I believe we do live in a very highly toxic world and that we have things coming at us from all different angles, whether that's in the form of mold or contaminated water or the scented everything that exists in the world everywhere. And I think our bodies just need some extra help in supporting the systems that naturally detoxify us. But that's one of those topics that I find quite controversial.
It's true. Yeah, I would agree with you on that because it's not so simple necessarily. It's drinking a detox tea. It's a kind of a whole lifestyle. This is going to sound super ridiculous, but we take our own pillowcases when we travel because if we're staying in an Airbnb or a family member's house that has like the super fragrant sheets, laundry detergent, like I will wake up with big puffy eyes and be sneezing and, I have some chemical sensitivities and, you have to so detox really or low tox living is kind of many decisions. There's so many decisions involved in, like, I've got an air filter over here. We purify our water and we are choosing personal care products that have fewer toxins in them. So, and then so there's low tox living and then there's actual detoxing. So if you have mold exposure or something like the gentleman with Alzheimer's, you need to be, doing some more active detoxing typically. But, like I do sauna, I try to a couple of times a week, just it becomes a lifestyle practice to reduce the toxins because there's no way that you can entirely eliminate toxin exposure in this day and age.
I, by the way, don't think it's crazy that you bring your own pillowcases because I am also a sensitive girly. And even in hotels, I find some nights I'll wake up scratching because even just the amount of bleach that they use on the sheets causes issues with my skin and I'll have a terrible night's sleep. So I'm like this close to bringing my own complete sheet set when I travel.
Yep. King size or the queen size or maybe you just need like a protective sleeve that you put yourself in, like a
Snuggie. Yeah. Just wear that to bed.
Like a sleep suit for adults. Casey, so many people with chronic illness describe losing parts of themselves when they go through this whole journey, right? So bringing it back to things like energy and their confidence and just a sense of who they are. How did autoimmunity impact your identity and what did you have to change internally before your body could begin to heal?
You do lose parts of yourself in the process. I mean, for me, I had to retract from social stuff for a long time. Like, it didn't feel like I had, at least while I was ill and healing, I didn't have the energy to really, get together with friends and I live in Boulder, Colorado. So like hiking and being active is a big deal. And the reason that we live here, for a while, I couldn't do the things that I desperately, wanted to do that had become a part of my lifestyle, like hiking, getting together with friends to go on a hike. Our family is really active, and before I got sick, I hiked to Machu Picchu and that kind of thing. And so, so there was a giving up of the identity for being sick. And then to get better, I think maybe, this is also kind of where you're going. You have to let go of parts of yourself to get better. And I think I lived in a state of kind of chronic stress for a very long time, just kind of always being stressed and pushing myself in my work. And so I work less now than I used to because I need to spend more of my time doing self-care stuff. And then I also need to make sure that I'm protecting myself in terms of the stress that I'm putting on myself. So I did have a little bit of flexibility in terms of working a little bit less and not pushing myself just all the time. So those are the main ways that I think it's kind of changed my identity. And now I'm back to being able to do some of those things I couldn't do before, like hiking and all that. But it has changed me, certainly mellowed me. My adrenals were just crazed all the time. Like, I think it was this constant state of like fight or flight for a lot of my life when I think back. And, as you know, like that's terrible for your gut, for your digestion, for any aspect of your health.
You brought up redefining your relationship to work and maybe striking a better balance between work and life. This is something that I notice in the stories that we've shared and the people we've talked to. A lot of chronic illness sufferers actually turn to entrepreneurship for that reason, like to be able to have more control over their schedule, to be able to pace themselves, spend more time on self-care and nourishment. And I think that is really interesting, also really challenging, but really interesting that people are starting to put those things together in their mind and say, like, maybe we aren't thriving in this crazy capitalistic hustle culture life that we're all in right now, and maybe there's a better way.
Corporate culture for sure is not very healthy. We were kind of going that direction for a while, like in a healthier way. I think the pandemic kind of helped with that. Like people were working from home more, and it felt like we were trending more toward a healthier work-life balance. But it's actually starting to feel like that is reversing again, trending, at least in the United States. It feels like it's trending toward the other direction. Like, how much can we
Totally.
work? How much can we get out of each person? And how much more can we ask them to do? And let's bring them back in the office at least a few days a week. And so they have a commute and have to be in the office. And they can't do their sauna at lunchtime or so it definitely affects folks' ability to be able to care for themselves. And it is kind of a part-time job, not just healing, I feel like, but continuing to stay well can sometimes feel like a part-time job. And I don't want that to sound too intimidating to people, but thinking about what, like meal planning, what I'm going to eat this week, and shopping for it and cooking. Making time in my day to go on walks and to meditate, to journal, to do my sauna. Like all these things that I do keep me healthy, and they become non-negotiables. But like I have to have time for that. We have to make the time for that.
100% agree. It is a part-time job. Once you establish those foundations that help you feel your best, the thought of giving those up is preposterous. If someone was to say, you need to be in the office for 40 plus hours a week, I would just be like, well, no, I can't do that because I need to go to the gym in the morning and I need to have my breakfast and I need to go for a walk after lunch. These are the things I do.
Yeah, and you've essentially just cultivated a healthy lifestyle for yourself. This is about lifestyle change. And you probably only feel like it's a part-time job because you've got the other side of the coin to reflect back on when you weren't doing any of those things. So if you were brought up doing these things habitually and you had absolutely no idea what the other side of the coin looked like, then you would probably have a very different perspective on it.
Right. Like if I grew up in Finland, Finland seems like the place where they've got this like...
That's where sauna originated from anyway, isn't it?
Where what?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sauna.
That's where sauna
Oh,
was
yeah,
from.
exactly. This sort of culture, or like kind of Norwegian countries, this culture of like self-care and slowing down, maybe because it's so dark in the winters or something. I don't know. Maybe they had to sort of retreat in and spend more time on self-care. And I don't know, it's just a theory, but yeah, right. If you kind of grow up with that, then it's just part of your life. Otherwise, we have to teach ourselves and learn and figure out ways to integrate it in a modern environment, which can be tough. But you do what you can. I think a little goes a long way. Sometimes my husband is learning to meditate. He just started like this week and he's starting with 5 minutes, and just that's so much better than not doing anything at all. It's just taking the 5 minutes to focus in and, stop what he's doing.
It's
Yeah.
amazing.
If you have 5 minutes or you have 10 minutes, there's something you can be doing that's beneficial. It doesn't have to be anyone who's listening to this and says in their mind, maybe like, well, I have a full-time job and so I can't make time for all of these things. It looks different for everybody. And even if you spend that 15 minutes that you have on something that's going to benefit you, like that's a starting point, and that's okay.
And then you log into their phone and look at their settings and go on screen time under social media and then say, yeah, you do have the time.
That's true. It's true. All the things you could have been doing when you were scrolling.
Casey, I'm interested to know, because you've talked to so many people, I'm interested to know if there are any stories you've heard that have left a lasting impact on you or inspired you or surprised you, if there's anything that comes to mind.
Many. One that I thought might be fun to share with you two and your audience is there's a Crohn's story I captured, and this woman was actually an MD. She was going through med school and had Crohn's, and it was pretty severe and life impacting. And, she's in this medical world, had access to so much information, any, care that she needed. And what actually changed her was she came across a story online of a cat that had IBD, that they changed the cat's diet and it was fixed. Like the cat went on a, paleo diet or some sort of anti-inflammatory diet, and it was fixed. And she was like, my doctors are telling me the diet doesn't matter, but it fixed the cat. So I'm going to try it. So she went on this diet and she got much, much better. She had to do some other things, but like, it feels kind of ridiculous to hear that story and go, all right, she was inspired because a cat was healed. And that's how this MD had to learn that diet or nutrition could matter. Anyway, she ultimately went on to, mindset was huge for her, and visualization. She visualized every day, just over and over and over, that her intestines were perfectly clean and pink or something like that. It was fascinating to hear that she, kind of like what she was doing, along with reducing stress and nutrition, etc. The other stories that really stick with me the most are where the people were so debilitated. There was a woman named Shannon who she was so debilitated with 5 autoimmune disorders that she didn't feel like she could go on vacation. And that was her turning point, was that when she was too sick to do nothing, like to sit on a beach, she just didn't feel like she could even go and enjoy just relaxing on a vacation. So she methodically started with one thing, and she was like, for a year, I'm going to focus on nutrition. And then year 2, it was more like movement. Year 3, it was like addressing past trauma, and then on and on. And so she was really methodical about it, and no longer has any of those autoimmune disorders. So it completely changed her life. I mean, she really had almost no quality of life.
I love that you shared that timeline, because I think that puts this whole thing into perspective for people. The healing journey can be long, and it can take time. It's not find the thing, fix the thing, feel better. It's a process. And I love that she decided to focus on one thing and get consistent with that before moving on to the next thing, because I think often we get so fixated on like, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And then if we can't do it all perfectly, then it's just like, oh, well, why even bother? So I definitely believe in like that slow, methodical approach is going to give you so much more traction or build momentum.
And start with one thing. I mean, and so many of the stories really are just starting with one thing. You know, what one thing can I change in my day or my diet or my habits that can start making a difference? And so it doesn't feel overwhelming. You know, I went on a walk with a friend recently who does have some autoimmunity, and she's like, it just all feels overwhelming. Like all the things that you need to do or should do. And I was like, well, yeah, well, what's one thing you can do? Can you just start with one thing to make it feel less overwhelming?
In our already crazy busy lives, it seems like more to do, more shoulds, adding more to your to-do list. But we speak about this often. A lot of the time it requires doing less or saying no to more things, because we can't keep adding to an already full plate and expect to really get anywhere.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, kind of the have to embrace the joy of missing out sometimes, that I want to do this thing, or I want to volunteer, or I want to do this. Yeah, we're always kind of pushing to do more, but really, like you said, you have to sometimes say no and let go of some things, and not feel bad about it, not feel guilty about it. Just realize like, oh, I'm taking care of myself. And, that's part of me just taking care of myself when I say no.
For someone who's listening, who's perhaps exhausted or overwhelmed and afraid of getting their hopes up again, what would you want them to hear before they tried to change anything, if they were listening to this episode right now?
I think really it kind of goes back to the hope. Yeah, you feel like you've tried everything, or doctors don't have answers for you. Going back to somehow finding the hope again, I think makes a huge difference. So whether you need to, look at, find other stories or find other people, maybe you can find a community of people either online or near you who've done this, who've gotten better from something similar or the same thing as you. It's going to give you that hope, like find that kernel of hope. And maybe it's also some mindset work to get yourself there. Some meditation or some journaling or something along the line, like, yes, kind of almost cognitive behavioral therapy, just sort of like, you kind of need to make a leap at times to get to that place of hope.
So Casey, what's next for you? You have this online magazine, you have your podcast, your book. Do you have any other projects in the works, or are you going to continue to share these stories and create this success community online? Where are you going in the next year?
Yeah, good question. I love that. And I'm really just trying to grow this, trying to continue telling the stories that people need to hear. And I think what's interesting to me is I have a wish list of stories, like, because, I have friends or family members who are contending with certain things. And then I'll be like, okay, that's on my wish list. I'm going to seek out stories of inspiration and hope on, my dad has neuropathy. So now I'm looking for stories on how people are solving neuropathy. And it's really, I don't know, it seems kind of driven. I know I'm helping other people, but like I'm also helping, my friends and family with each story that I pursue and capture. So really it is just about growing the platform with more stories and to reach more people. Because I still think the perception is some autoimmunity isn't reversible, isn't fixable, or many of these conditions are not. And until the conventional wisdom becomes, oh, we can change this, we can reverse it. Doesn't have to be a forever thing or a continuous decline. Just going to keep telling these stories to get the message out there of what's possible.
I love that. So we will definitely link to your website, podcast, all of the things in our show notes for the episode. Is there anything else that you wanted to share while you're here?
I guess my site is searchable. Like if there are certain things that people are contending with, you can, search on the site, like migraines or menopause. I'm doing a menopause story this week. So I point people mainly there. If you're looking for a specific story, then that is a great place to start.
Awesome. And I can't wait to hear or read the menopause story, because that's something that's so prevalent in my life, my friend group, the media right now, and hopefully like shining some light on that, as well as this is not just something that we have to live with, and that these symptoms aren't just the hand we're dealt because we're women. I look forward to reading that.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. And I really appreciate the chance to chat with both of you and get to know you and share.
Thanks, Casey. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you guys.